Good afternoon. I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now, coming to you from our digital desk. We're just moments away from taking you to a news conference that's going to be put on by the Ohio Attorney General, Dave Yost. This is concerning the future of training Ohio's police officers. In 2023, Attorney General Yost convened what he calls a blue ribbon panel on looking at the training of our officers. Currently, most police departments in the state, most of them, not all, send new hires, new candidates, new cadets to a school in Columbus. That school is generally run by the Ohio State Highway Patrol, along with others. The cadets go through training. Once they graduate, then they go back to their departments, perhaps receive some more training, or are then sworn in. But it was last year that Yost convened what he called a blue ribbon panel to go ahead and look at the way we are training officers. And just reading, they didn't give us very much to go on what this is, but the panel, as well as Yost, are about to announce the group's recommendations for multi-dimensional changes. That sounds pretty significant. So it obviously, people around the state, police officers from around the state are curious as to what that means moving forward. It does look like we are very close to going. So we're going to turn this live over to, this is a Zoom meeting, but we'll expect to see the Attorney General move in at any point. There are also the other members who sat on this panel that will give some insight into exactly what's going to change about this. So let's take a listen. Looks like someone has their mic on, and we'll get that muted and get this underway.
I think we're ready. Thank you for joining in. My name is Bethany McCorkle. I have the privilege of being the communication director for Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. We wanted to make sure we brought the latest information on a task force and information that will be brought to you in a report that will be released. But this time I'm going to have the Attorney General go through some of the details. So we will have Q&A afterwards. So please let us know in the chat if you have a question. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Police training has kind of been at a standstill in some ways for the past decade. We've added things responsively during my administration, prior administrations, as different things come up, added a layer, added a course here and there. During the pandemic, we began a rebuild of our police training here in Ohio, but the substance was largely the same body of knowledge, the same body of skills. We were looking at delivering it from a more efficient platform. And so we looked at the old online offerings, many of which were horribly out of date and poorly produced. We updated them. We made them much more accessible and easy to use, and expanded the current knowledge while we got rid of some of the dated material that was not as applicable any longer. We also moved to a regional concept in service delivery to be close to home. No longer do officers have to train in London, Ohio, which is for many parts of the state a hours-long drive and a stay overnight away from their families, away from their communities, not in the jurisdiction. With 6 remote learning locations around the state, we now have the ability for officers to be able to, with a often very short drive, access high-quality education at these regional centers, and we are very excited about these changes. The challenge remains that we're doing a lot of what we've always been doing, and the world is changing around us. Expectations are changing from the people who pay the bills and the communities that we in law enforcement serve. what does law enforcement look like in the future, and what does training for law enforcement look like? Well, last September, we put together a blue ribbon task force. You see some of the members standing here with me today. These are all career experts in law enforcement and related fields, some civilians. And we asked them to take a look at what we were doing and what we ought to be doing, to ask that Robert Kennedy question of instead of asking why, ask why not. I'm here today to announce that they've completed their work and submitted it to me for review, and I've been very impressed with the totality of their work. At a tactical level, there are a number of changes that I think are going to rebalance the emphasis in the curriculum and are going to make not only our officers better, but the training they get is going to become much more efficient, much more focused, and much more applicable to the conditions that they're going to see throughout their career on the streets of our great state. You will find and hear shortly some of the details we're lessening. For example, there is a large commitment of ours to radar calibration and using a radar gun. Well, unless you're working a specified targeted detail, odds that you are going to need to know all that are pretty minimal. And if you do get assigned to that duty, the likelihood is going to be that you're going to be trained on it contemporaneous with that assignment. So we're rebalancing the curriculum away from some of those kinds of things toward the sorts of things that officers are and deputies are encountering on a daily basis. You'll also hear that we are going to move to virtual reality training using VR goggles. This is something that a number of you in the media have already test driven, if you will, and got to look at one of the training scenarios. So you may have a little bit of an idea what this looks like already. But the key is there's only so much you can learn out of a book. There's only so much information that you can get out of a PowerPoint presentation. And at some point, you need to be dealing with real context, real situations, and learning about that, the decision making and the work of policing in an environment where it's real-time consequences. Up till now, that's been largely done by on the field training, on the street training. Field training officers get assigned to rookie cops. The trouble with that, of course, is that while it does give you the adrenaline and the pressure of making real-time decisions in uncertain and often chaotic situations, it also has real-time consequences in the real world. Virtual training, just like for our fighter pilots and other specialty elements in the military, can be the training can be greatly enhanced by using virtual reality, where when the decision goes the wrong way, the real world consequences don't follow. You have the opportunity to learn, observe, and learn from your mistakes without them having that high cost. So I want to mention finally that these are all multidimensional recommendations that are designed to work together. There's no silver bullet here. There's no one new thing that's going to happen, although there's a bunch of new things. There's not one old thing that was a mistake or that we're going to stop doing altogether. What this is a holistic approach that's designed to look at the entirety of what it means to be in law enforcement. Certainly, there are the things that we see on the police procedurals or the evening news, but there's also long periods of time when you're interacting with the community, You're meeting people on your beat. You're responding to situations that are important, but not life-threatening. And all of that has to work together. I'm confident that this new blueprint from this distinguished group of experts is going to put Ohio on a route to be the best in the nation at training our law enforcement officers. I'd like to thank the task force members. The ones in attendance today include Tom Quinlan, who is our new executive director at OPATA, the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy. He chaired the task force. Thank you, Tom. We also have Kurt Althouse from Vandalia Police and representative of the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police. Sheriff Orvis Campbell of Tuscarawas County, representing the sheriffs. Eric Henderson, the Deputy Director and Assistant Chief of the Dayton Police Department. Sheriff George Meyer, Stark County, also a BSSA representative. We have Danilyn Miller, the Sylvania Police Chief, and Pastor Eddie Parker III, who is the Community Engagement Liaison at OPATA. Also not in attendance, we had Steve Click, Nick Convis, Aaron Jones, and Emily Rubnik. I want to thank all of the people who have put massive numbers of hours and effort into making this blueprint successful and exciting, and most of all, what I'm convinced will be effective for law enforcement in Ohio. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn to Tom Quinlan and ask him to come in and detail some of the specifics on this program.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Thank you to Attorney General Yost for his vision, setting this task force in motion to relook at how we train police officers in Ohio, and also for the support he's provided to all of the task force members as we went about this work. It was very critical discussions we had, and without that support, it would have been a harder process. So we appreciate that. I'd like to thank the task force members. Each one of them, as Attorney General Yost introduced, spent countless hours reviewing, researching, and dialogues in our discussions, public meetings, and their work speaks for itself. Very proud of the work they've done. So we started our very first meeting October 4th. We held 10 meetings. 4 of them were public. We had over 100 people from police and the public come and speak with us in person. We wrapped up our work on January 24th, and today we have the completed report ready to go with some new concepts and new strategies and methodologies to provide training that frankly have not been seen in Ohio before, some of these. So with that in mind, again, we reviewed probably more than 1,000 pages of academic research and other professional publications, talked to a lot of people. And we've also looked at the idea of kind of countering this or positioning this as going away a little bit from law enforcement term to police services. Again, it's not just about enforcing laws anymore. Police are called on for so many tasks. So we're looking at what services police provide. And so that's where we'll incorporate this recommendation. How we laid this report that we laid out is set up as each recommendation, and then we identify what the issue is with that particular area and what our remedy is. And we came up with 7 core recommendations, I think, that will fundamentally change how we train officers. So let me get right into the recommendations. The first one is to change the curriculum for peace officer basic training that the commission subscribes to for an officer that can serve as a peace officer in Ohio. We found that there's a lot of training that is very important, but does not specifically address one of the most used core competencies that every single officer uses on every single run, from the most mundane to the most critical high stress situation, and that's communications. Although we have many hours in a lot of other subjects, 78 hours, for instance, in subject control and 40 hours in radar, 0 hours in communication. specifically how to talk with people, how to read body language, how to not escalate situations, but de-escalate situations. Communication has become a real key piece that we found to be missing in the standard training for peace officers. So we've incorporated a total of 48 hours of communication training. There's 740 hours of training in the basic peace officer training. Many academies offer well over 1,000. You have to have 740 minimum to serve as a peace officer. We are recommending to the commission the removal of 72 hours of training and replacing it with 72 hours of additional training, so there will be a net zero effect. And the training around interpersonal communications, just how to speak to someone. Everyone's so used to these cell phones and texting, one-way communication, short snippets. How do you actually speak to someone and diffuse a situation or get to the heart of what's going on? So 48 hours of training in that area. And we've added additional training around active threats and some important areas around critical decision-making, an ICAC model as known under the Police Executive Research Forum. So those are around training on communications. Now, the other area under basic curriculum that we identified was an area of performance around physical fitness standards. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of great life experience, have a lot of emotional intelligence. Academically, they're very proficient, but there are some struggles with physical fitness standards as they are set today based off this Cooper standard. So we have made, and we see that we're losing some in a time where it's really hard to recruit and retain good quality officers. We find that we're losing some people because of 3 or 4 seconds on a run or one push-up or one sit-up. So the 3 standards are push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5 mile run and a set time. So what we've done is made some modest adjustments to the physical fitness standard. What we are experiencing collectively, we see that people typically pass 2 of the 3 standards. If they're failing all 3, then there's another issue we address. But when they're only failing 1 and they have 2 chances, then they have to repeat an entire academy. Missing a run by a few seconds, this allows them to still graduate from the academy if they're deficient in 1 of the 3 categories and they meet it by a 75% standard. So it might give them a 30-second buffer, say, on a run. That allows them to still function as a peace officer in Ohio under what we're going to come to in recommendation number 2 is a certification level. So we will address those as well. So as part of that, we get to recommendation number 2. That recommendation is to create certification levels for peace officers. Right now, every officer in Ohio is counted the same. They're a certified officer, is a certified officer no matter if they're a part-time or a reserve officer seasonally up in one of the islands up around Lake Erie with 2 years on, or whether they're a seasoned professional or a lieutenant with 10, 15 years on just in investigations of homicide, say. They may have a lot more experience. They have a lot more education. So we have created standards, and we have in this report some samples of how those certification levels would apply. So you have a basic standard and you have a proficient or intermediate standard. That's what you have to graduate the academy. Then you can advance to, through your experience and your time on the job, and further education. This inspires continuing education throughout career-long learning. You can move to an advanced certification, a professional certification, or a master certification. And we see these a lot in the other trades. You have apprentice, journeyman, master. You have doctors and nurses have different levels of accreditation, certification. Our driver's license, we have, probationary license, we have operator's license, commercial license. This is something that's very common. And so we're going to use that as a way to distinguish officers throughout a career for the work that they have done. So with that in mind, the other piece of that I think is very important as you progress through different levels is that you complete the academy and you complete at least 320 hours, or 8 weeks of field training school with a certified program. So a lot of officers in some agencies will graduate the academy and they do a few days on coaching or a week or so and they're out on their own. We want to make sure we recognize those officers that have been through a robust field training program. And then the third recommendation is the creation of a tactical patrol officer. We've partnered with the Ohio Tactical Officers Association to create 80 hours worth of training that can specifically help officers when you have multiple officer responses to agitated, chaotic events. And when you have officers who think through the options, look at what the situation is, what decisions can they make, what approaches can they use, what communication styles do they need to do. SWAT uses this very effectively, and SWAT has better outcomes when they're called out on barricade situations and felony stops in some of these situations. This program allows officers on patrol to learn some of those same tactics and use it at a patrol level, vehicle encounters especially. You know, where to position yourself at a vehicle, how to encounter people in a vehicle, how not to escalate those situations. So those are going to be very important. That's an 80-hour course that is built out already. The fourth recommendation is using technology and implementing a situational decision-making model and a critical decision model in our training. I go back to the loosely quote Ben Franklin, who said, "Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand." So our training platform is in the classroom. If you just do classroom alone, it's forgettable. You're not going to remember those PowerPoint slides with the instructor with his back to you talking to the wall. That's forgettable. But we can tell you what you need to know. Then we can use virtual reality and other scenario-based platforms to train you on what that looks like. Once you understand better what it looks like, including things like duty to intervene, First Amendment auditors, duty to render aid, some of those really important concepts. Once you have those, then you go into a scenario situation and actually perform those. Now you've taken a forgettable lesson and made it an enduring lesson where you've actually experienced this, again, as A.G. Yost mentioned, before the stakes are high in a real life encounter with a member of the public. The fifth recommendation is integrating lesson plans. Right now, they're single topic. You go from one topic to the other and do your hours that are mandated for each hour. The missing piece is that we don't have anything streaming those together. So an officer is involved in a vehicle pursuit that turns into a foot pursuit, that turns into a forced entry into a house, that turns into a barricade or standoff, turns into a use of force. Then they have to write a report. Then they have to testify in court. Streaming those things together, those tasks together multidimensionally, allows officers to understand what their role is and how they have to properly document their actions and articulate why they engaged in the actions they did. We're also going to involve a supervisory perspective, a community perspective. We're going to look at wellness pieces in lesson plans, and we're also going to talk about model policy and how agencies can apply policies to those lessons. We also want to do these clusters of training where they're interconnected so you understand how all this fits together. The sixth recommendation is focusing continued professional training. Currently, Ohio law requires every peace officer in Ohio complete 24 hours of CPT training. And the problem we see with that right now is 8 hours is mandated by the commission. 16 hours is at the agency head's discretion. Now, that person is free to choose anything they want to train their officers on, but if they want reimbursed for that time by the state, they should be teaching contemporary progressive models of policing, not lessons that are outdated or are replicating bad tactics or bad practices. And we've seen some of that. So we want to make sure that they're doing the proper training looking forward, and that they're doing career track training. People that are following a supervisory route take training in supervisory or command functions. People are doing investigative or instructor routes. They follow those paths. And that's how we are going to approach the need to have ongoing training through your profession. The seventh recommendation, final recommendation, is firearms training. Right now, officers have to one time a year complete a 25-round course for marksmanship. They demonstrate they can hit the target accurately. The problem is there's no application of law, federal, state, or local law into that firearms training. So we are proposing a written test where officers, in addition to taking the actual on the firing line practical portion, complete a written test that covers law, when they're allowed to use weapons, how the laws apply to what serious physical harm is, duty to render aid, and other, issues with that. And we also strongly suggest that agencies add policy questions in there so you can confirm that officers understand each agency's respective policy. For instance, are you required to take a substance test, a drug test after an officer-involved shooting would be an example. We also would like to see decision-making courses, not just a marksmanship course in firearms, but also that there has to be a decision-making model in there. So you have to actually make decisions under pressure. And that's a really underserved area right now that we want to see added. So in summary, we're looking at adding communications and making it a focus of training and building communications into every lesson plan and community perspective so people understand how to police in their community. We also want to look at critical decision-making model. The University of Chicago has created a SITD, they call it. It's a situational decision-making model that has shown that it has dramatically reduced arrest that are unneeded or unnecessary arrest, reduced officer and public injury, and actually made a big impact on disparate policing. So with that in mind, we want to focus on the tactical officers program. The field training officers should be involved. Interconnected training will be a important piece, and so will scenario-based training. So where do we go from here? We recommend to the Attorney General that some semblance of this task force that are all professional, seasoned in their career, and have gone up through every rank of this profession and understand each rank, have some semblance of continuing oversight and monitoring, and be able to make adjustments in real time as we see policies change, we see legislation change, see case law change, we see community expectations change. And we will also be meeting with Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission and with legislatures to deal with anything that needs a legislative change or commission approval. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Attorney General Yost. I thank him again for his leadership here, and we'll have time for questions. Thank you.
So we'll do our best for questions.
So the first question is from Spencer Hickey. Do you want to try on the audio? If not, I can read your question. I'm going to go ahead and read it. The question is, how is this going to be implemented for current officers? It was touched on briefly, but as far as the 24-hour requirement.
So it's important to recognize that the current law only is for this biennium, this 2-year period. An important goal, and I look forward to working with the administration and the General Assembly, is to extend this out to the future. You can't have a basketball team that only trains 2 out of 4 years and expect a championship team. We need to fund and mandate this 24 hours training annually for each and every year. So I look forward to working with the General Assembly to accomplish that. As you heard from Tom, there are pieces of this that do impact the basic training. People are not going to have, that are currently on the job, are not going to have to go back and redo their basic training. But the majority of the things that we're looking at here are forward-looking. Part of that 24 hours of mandated annual training, training that candidly doctors and lawyers and accountants and many other professions, most of the medical professions have continuing education, social work has continuing education. We want the same kind of requirement for law enforcement. And all of our active 31,000 or so law enforcement officers in Ohio will, in fact, be impacted by some of these things that have been rolled out today that you heard.
The next question is from Laura Scudder with Channel 10.
Hi, so we've recently had some instances of officers being injured on the job here in Central Ohio, and this was sort of touched on a little bit at the end, but could you maybe talk about how, I mean, obviously they're put in unpredictable and unavoidable situations, but could you touch on how training will really help them respond to instances where, they might really be putting themselves in that kind of danger?
Well, when you're in a situation like that where there's potential for injury or worse, you have to fall back on your training. There is no time to sit back and analyze and go through a seven-step process to figure out what the right thing to do is. You have to be able to act quickly, decisively, and get it right. I'm happy when I look around the state and see that in millions of interactions between law enforcement and their communities, they do get it right over and over and over again. They get it right. So we're hoping that this improvement, this next level of training, is going to aid them. But let's not be Pollyannish. This is not a never again scenario. As long as there's evil in the world, there's going to be a threat to our heroes in blue and gray, and the sheriffs, the police officers, our patrol, and we should not discount the bravery and the courage and the dedication to the community that causes a man or a woman to run toward gunfire or a maniac with a knife instead of doing what most of us would do and run away.
The next question is from Avery Kramer with Dayton Daily News.
You may be on mute.
I think I'm just going to ask the question for her.
All right.
What aspects of these recommendations need to be approved by the commission or the legislature, and when can we expect the recommendations to actually be adopted into practice?
So there are several things that will require legislative approval. The most important of them, of course, is the continuation of the 24-hour requirement and the funding of it. But there are several other places where we need a statute adjusted. And we'll be working with the General Assembly. I hope that we can get that done well before the end of the year, but it must be done. This General Assembly expires in December of this year, and then we would have to start all over again. The OPATSI, the Training Commission, which oversees this function, it's housed in the Attorney General's office, but we have the commission to assist in leadership and oversight. Got a briefing this morning, and I talked with Sheriff Stanforth last Friday. He is thinking that he will probably call a virtual meeting for debate and consideration of approval of these changes in the next few weeks. So that will be up to the chair of the commission, but I have every reason to believe that it will move quickly.
We have another question. How does the task force plan to evaluate the training or teaching once it's in practice?
That is a great question, and something that I am regularly challenging our team to measure effectiveness. But one of the things that's very important is to recognize that until the training is constructed, it's difficult to be able to design the assessment instruments. So we do have a staff at OPATA that does auditing of the training programs. They will be used to look at the efficacy of these reforms and on everything. Look, if you've got a better idea than I do, I'm for your idea. If we try something that everybody agrees is a good idea and it ends up not working out, let's scrap it. If we've got something that works out well, let's do more of it. assessment is key, and I promise you that there will be evaluations of the outcomes on these recommendations.
That was the last question.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to the members of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. You did a fabulous job on short time. Thank you, everyone.
Dan DeRose with 19 News as the Attorney General wraps up their news conference on just exactly how police training is going to change moving forward. You heard there that some of this is going to need approval from the legislature. Some of it can be done right there at OPATA. 7 different areas, don't need to go over all of them, but the ones that stand out. This certification process, this is something Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has talked about for a long time, and it looks like it's actually going to happen. Doctors, teachers have to be certified. They have to take tests. They have to qualify. They have to be certified from year in, year out. They want to see that done with the state's police officers. When it comes to technology for training using virtual reality, and then continued professional training, they want to mandate that every officer in the state has to complete 24 hours worth of training every year to keep that certification, and that's something that would have to be paid for by the state. If an officer is off the job and heading to training, that officer still needs to be paid, so they'll have to find taxpayer money somewhere at the legislature to pay for that. And then firearms training. I thought this was interesting. It's once a year, each officer has to go and fire 25 shots to show their proficiency. But now they're asking that there should be a test to go along with that. Shouldn't they be tested on when the use of force is legal and is permitted, on the idea of when you're going to have to fill out certain forms, when certain forms of use of force are used, and whether or not you will have to be drug screened if you use a taser or a gun in a use of force case. Some very interesting changes. These are just proposals at this point. And again, the Attorney General sounded fairly confident that he'll be able to get these moved through very soon. If we have any other breaking news, we'll bring it to you here on our digital platforms. Our 3 o'clock news and 4 o'clock news are preempted with soccer, so we will see you at 5 o'clock for the beginning of Cleveland 19 News on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Have a great afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media at Cleveland 19 News.